Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a really complex one, the Iran-Israel conflict. Often feels intractable, doesn't it?
It really does.
But, our sources actually suggest there's maybe more going on beneath the surface, some surprising elements that might challenge that view.
Right.
So our mission, like always, is to cut through the noise, pull out the key insights from the material you've shared, and basically give you a shortcut to understanding what's happening in this very volatile, very critical situation. Okay, let's unpack this.
Exactly. And this deep dive, it should provide that crucial context, help you connect the dots on something that has, well, huge implications, not just regionally, but, for global stability too.
Absolutely. And we've designed this specifically for you, the listener. The goal is to give you the most important nuggets of knowledge without it feeling overwhelming. So we'll guide you through, the history behind it all, look at the current situation, what the international community is doing, and then maybe touch on, well, possibilities for peace, if any exist.
Sounds good.
So that historical context you mentioned, it feels absolutely key here. To really get the current tensions, we kind of have to go back, right? Back to 1979.
Yes, 1979, the Iranian Revolution. That's the watershed moment.
It transformed Iran into an Islamic republic and fundamentally shifted its whole alignment, moving away from the West.
And what's really insightful from the sources isn't just that Iran supports groups like Hezbollah, it's how this whole proxy strategy lets them project power, but without a direct head-on confrontation. Our sources talk about it as creating this complex ring of fire around Israel. It's a deliberate ambiguity in their strategy. It really complicates traditional deterrence.
But Iran hasn't recognized Israel since '79, correct?
Correct. Consistent policy.
Yeah.
And they've provided significant material support, everything from advanced rockets to money to groups like Hezbollah, Hamas. These are seen, according to the sources, as really key pillars of Iran's influence in the region.
Okay, so turning to Israel's perspective then. This isn't just an ideological disagreement for them, is it? You mentioned the support for these groups. How does that become a concrete security threat on their borders?
Yeah.
Do the sources detail specific worries?
Oh, absolutely. From Israel's viewpoint, Iran's growing influence, these proxy networks that the sources detail it, represents a direct strategic encirclement. And it's getting more sophisticated.
Right.
And we've seen Israel respond with its own actions, covert actions, things like the Stuxnet cyber attack, which reportedly targeted Iranian nuclear facilities.
A big deal at the time.
Huge deal. And also, quite dramatically, the targeted assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists. Our sources kind of frame this as a strategy of mowing the lawn.
Mowing the lawn?
Yeah, basically aiming to degrade capabilities, push back threats, deter Iran without triggering a full-scale war. It's been going on for decades.
Decades. Wow. When you say it like that, it really hammers home the deep roots here, doesn't it?
Right.
It's not just today's news. It's this long historical wait. So let's fast forward then. The current situation, mid-2025. According to our sources, it sounds incredibly precarious.
It is.
Earlier this year, there was this drone strike on Israeli territory, apparently carried out by Iranian-backed militias, that seemed to set off quite a chain reaction.
It really did. Israel retaliated almost immediately, launching airstrikes against Iranian-linked forces in Syria. And what really stands out here, based on the sources, is that this back and forth, it isn't just tit for tat anymore. The fear of a major regional war breaking out, it feels very real. Like it could be just one miscalculation away.
And it's so much bigger than just Iran and Israel, isn't it? Iran's influence, it stretches across the Middle East. You've got Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, various proxy forces, political connections.
That's right. And that wide reach just dramatically raises the stakes for the whole region.
Yeah, if something truly ignites between Iran and Israel directly, it feels like it could easily pull in so many other actors. It could destabilize, well, everything.
An interesting point the sources raise is, while the Iranian government is very active externally, you have voices inside Iran, particularly younger Iranians who are apparently becoming more critical of this foreign policy, of the heavy involvement in all these regional conflicts. There's a growing debate internally about the cost, foreign adventures versus domestic needs.
That's a really crucial internal dynamic to watch. So given all this complexity, this tension, what about the international community? How are the big global powers handling this high-stakes standoff?
Well, let's look at the U.S. first. Their support for Israel remains pretty unwavering. That's not really a surprise.
No.
But the sources do suggest they're also maybe cautiously engaging in some back-channel diplomacy, trying to de-escalate, trying to avoid that wider conflict everyone fears.
Makes sense. What about Russia? They're a major player in the region too, especially in Syria.
Yes, Russia plays a very delicate game here. They've got significant strategic interests in Syria, plus long-standing ties with Iran, so their position is complex.
No.
They kind of need stability to maintain their own influence, but they also seem to leverage their relationships with both sides. It's a balancing act.
In China, they've traditionally focused on stability for energy reasons, haven't they?
Historically, yes. Their big priority was regional stability because they depend heavily on Middle East energy.
But is that changing?
Well, the sources indicate they're becoming perhaps a bit more vocal, expressing more support for peaceful negotiations, even maybe offering to mediate. That's kind of an interesting shift from their usual hands-off approach.
Okay, so that's the big powers. But then there's this other huge development complicating things. The Abraham Accords.
Oh, yes, the Accords,
Yeah.
a major shift.
You have Arab states, like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, actually normalizing ties with Israel. That completely upends traditional regional alignments, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Our sources analyze how this creates, new alliances, but also potentially new tensions, new fault lines in the region. It redraws the map in a way.
So, with all that, all the history, the proxies, the covert actions, the regional players, the internal dynamics, it brings us to the really big question. Is peace actually possible here? Can we realistically see normalization between Iran and Israel anytime soon?
Well, based on the sources we've looked at, significant near-term normalization seems highly improbable. The divides are just too deep right now.
That's what I suspected.
But, and this is important, we have seen surprising diplomatic breakthroughs before, even in conflicts that seemed totally intractable.
Like the Abraham Accords themselves.
Exactly. The Accords in 2020, normalizing relations between Israel and several Arab nations, it showed that these long-standing, deeply ingrained animosities can shift. It's not impossible.
Okay, fair point. But achieving that kind of shift between Iran and Israel specifically, the sources suggest it would require some massive policy changes, right?
Oh, fundamental shifts. On Iran's side, they'd likely need to significantly scale back their involvement with proxy groups across the region.
Which is core to their current strategy.
Absolutely. And for Israel, they'd probably have to ease their military posture quite a bit, particularly those strategic operations we talked about.
Those are enormous asks for both sides,
Yeah.
almost existential maybe.
They really are. And this broader context just highlights how deeply entrenched these issues are. It's not just military, it's ideological, it's political.
Yeah.
What the sources really get into is the internal political will needed in both Tehran and Jerusalem to even consider making such huge concessions. For Iran, pulling back from proxies challenges a core part of their revolutionary foreign policy identity.
And for Israel.
For Israel, easing their military posture requires a profound rethinking of their whole security doctrine, how they perceive threats and survival.
So if we try to boil it down, summarizing the core of this conflict, based on everything we discussed from the sources,
Yeah.
it really is about these deeply embedded issues of power, identity, and ultimately survival.
Precisely. And, while we sit here talking about geopolitics and strategy, it's crucial we don't forget the human cost. Civilians on both sides are the ones caught in the middle, paying the price for these ongoing tensions, living under the constant threat of escalation. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that's always the tragic reality.
It truly is.
Yeah.
Which leaves us, and you, with a final thought to maybe chew on. Given these really complex drivers, power, identity, survival, and the huge policy shifts needed for peace, like Iran dialing back proxies and Israel easing its military stance, what does the existence of surprising diplomatic breakthroughs like those Abraham Accords actually tell us? Does it show unexpected pathways can emerge even in the most bitter disputes? Or does it highlight just how unique those circumstances were and how high the hurdles remain here? What shifts, internal or external, might genuinely, finally turn the tide in this incredibly deep-rooted conflict? Something to think about. Until next time, stay curious.